Hey everyone, it is Grant Winsauer and
Jack Rody.
back here on the Bear Claw cast. And we've got a good amount of stuff for you today. We have we're going to go over the results for the Bears. Or oh my God, the the playoffs of the wild card playoffs. I'm sorry, I always think we're going to start talking about the Bears right away. But we'll talk about how the Bears. Couple of interviews have gone that we've gotten actually information about, and those are actually some good coaching options. With Ben Johnson and Pete Carroll, those are the two that we're going to discuss later on. And then we're going to talk about the wrinkle where the Bears are interested in interviewing Marcus Freeman, but I don't see it happening. But we'll get into that later. And then we'll talk about Mike McCarthy parting ways with the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't think that becomes official until tomorrow, which is why we haven't heard of them requesting interviews from anyone yet. But let's get into it. So, out of the right, five games that have been played this weekend, which one's your favorite so far, Jack?
I think I'd be hard pressed to say any game besides that Washington and Tampa Bay game last night. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's been the one game that was really felt close the entire way. I know that Philly and Green Bay was a one score game for a decent amount of time, and Denver and Buffalo was a one score game at halftime. But it seemed like uh, most of what happened was what we kind of expected outside of the Chargers and Texans game and that Tampa Bay and Washington game. So I think those were definitely the two games of the weekend, but for very different reasons. That
Yes,
Houston game
I
was just
I
weird.
mean I completely agree with you. I honestly thought that the Chargers were going to come away with that game. I mean I got to give C.J. Stroud and that Texans team their props, but I mean I feel so bad for uh, Justin Herbert because I mean he's gotten his contract, he's played at a high level, but the one thing that he hasn't done is win a playoff game, and I thought that he could win this. I thought that he could win this week. Not saying that the Texans are bad. It felt like the Chargers finally had the right coach to lead them and all that stuff, and they were playing, great ball, and then you score 12 on the Texans, which kind of is hard to believe. I mean, they
Yeah,
have
I
a
mean, I
really
know
good defense, but
they do.
I thought that the Chargers would come out on top. But what were you gonna say, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you like take a step back and think about it, I think this Chargers team is probably a year ahead of schedule of where they even
Oh,
anticipated themselves
absolutely,
being.
absolutely.
I don't think a lot of people going into this year had them projected for much more than like 7 or 8 wins, and they went out and won 11. And you are right. Like I fully expected them to have a good shot at winning that game just because of the injuries to the wide receiver core in Houston, as well as just the way they ended the season. A couple brutal losses to Kansas City and Baltimore where they got blown out. But I mean, props to the Texans. Clearly, the experience they gained last year, winning that playoff game and CJ Stroud's first playoff game, paid off again this year. And I'm assuming they're probably going to be like 9.5 point underdogs when they go to Kansas City next weekend. But as we know, Kansas City wins a lot of games, but they win a lot of games close. So I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that the Texans can keep this one close next weekend.
Yes. For context, let's just say the important stats. C.J. Stroud completed 22 out of 33 passes for 282 yards with one passing touchdown and one interception. Justin Herbert struggled, obviously, completing 14 of 32 passes for 242 yards with only one passing touchdown and four interceptions. And fun fact in this one playoff game, he threw more interceptions than he threw the whole season. Which I mean, I hate to mention that fact, but that's a pretty good fact to talk
I
about.
mean, it's just something about Houston's defense and interceptions. They picked off Goff 5 times in a game earlier this year. Like, even though they've struggled as a team at different points, that defense has definitely been able to generate turnovers. And come playoff time, that's always a big factor.
Yeah. And then the Ravens took on the Steelers Saturday night, and the Ravens were in command all game. Russell Wilson completed 20 of 29 passes for 270 yards and two passing touchdowns. The problem was they could not get the running game going, and in order to win games, you have to have a balance of both. Uh, the the Ravens had a great game with Lamar Jackson completing 16 of 21 for 175 yards with two passing touchdowns. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but let me get on to the next stat, and then it's a more reasonable number. The Ravens also had a great running game with Derrick Henry getting 26 touches for 186 yards and two touchdowns. So in if you add all that up, that's like probably close to 300 something yards with four touchdowns. So
And then Lamar also had, I think, like 12 or 13 carries for 75 yards as well. I think he had 72 exactly is what he ended the game with. So he was running the ball a lot as well.
oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that's just such a dangerous backfield. I mean, you if you defend Derrick Henry, you're bound to get uh, destroyed by Lamar, and if you defend Lamar, you're going to get destroyed by Derrick Henry. So, you can't really pick your poison with those two. You have to defend them both, but you can't defend them both.
Yeah.
So that's a hard thing. There is one thing that I have to say about Arthur Smith. He has an interview with the Bears for their head coaching job. We both agree that he should not be on this list, and teams can cancel interviews, but I doubt that they will, just because they're trying to get so much information. But he should not be on this list at all. So I just don't want him on this list, but he's on the list. So on
Yeah.
to the Sunday games. The Broncos took on the Bills, and this was another blowout win for the Bills. The Bills won 31-7 with Josh Allen completing 20 of 26 passes for 272 passing yards and two passing touchdowns. James Cook also had a great game with 23 touches with for 120 yards and a rushing touchdown. The Broncos struggled, only scoring 7 points, with rookie Bo Nix completing 13 of 22 passes for 144 yards and one touchdown pass. The Broncos could not get anything going on the ground, and I think this is the year, if the Bills get there, that the Bills finally beat the Chiefs. What are your thoughts on the last couple games, Jack?
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as the Baltimore game goes, I think it was just another great display of Todd Monken leaning into what his offense does well and play
Sure.
calling such. Some of the holes that Derrick Henry and Lamar had to run through in that game were pretty ridiculous. I don't know if you saw the wildcat snap that Derrick Henry took. They sent Lamar in motion, and Derrick Henry literally didn't get touched until like 20 yards downfield. So that
Well,
offense,
that's just Derrick Henry,
they're
man.
they're my they're my Super Bowl pick out of the AFC, which is kind of what I was going to touch on next. I feel like I'm probably stating the obvious, but I think that obviously Buffalo and Baltimore will be the game of the week next week,
I
and
can
I
agree.
think
I can agree.
whoever wins that game, I think it'll be Baltimore, even though it's in Buffalo. I think they will beat Kansas City. I just think Baltimore is almost impossible to stop if they have a ground game going early.
Hmm.
And their defense, which started out really slow, has actually been the number one scoring defense in the NFL since about, I think, week 10 or 11. So they've really turned it around. And then the Bills, I mean, I think everyone knew they were going to win this game. The Broncos snuck into the playoffs, probably wouldn't
Hmm.
have gotten in if
Yeah.
Kansas City needed to play that last week. But
Right.
Josh Allen, every time you watch him, there's always one play every week where you're just like, how the heck did he do
Yeah.
that? Which was obviously that fourth down touchdown pass to Ty Johnson
Yeah.
was
That was a
pretty
great,
insane.
great throw, man.
Yeah,
I, I mean, me and my dad were watching that game, and we're both thinking, you know, he thought it was a catch before I did, but I'm like, I don't know. It was a great throw, but I thought I saw Ty Johnson's foot touch the ground on the white before uh, getting possession of the ball. But I mean, great throw, and I mean, you know, I think it's a two for MVP, depending on how far the Ravens make it and Bills make it. I I think it's a two man race between Josh Allen or Lamar. I mean,
Yeah, and it's gonna suck because let's say like Lamar wins MVP and the Bills win, then people are gonna say, "Oh, Lamar shouldn't have gotten MVP," and vice versa.
exactly,
Like if Josh Allen
exactly,
wins, but the Ravens still go into Buffalo and win, like I really just hope, for lack of argument's sake, that whoever ends up winning the MVP also wins this game, so we can't hear people
sure,
complain about one
yeah.
not getting it over the other.
Well,
But
the
that's just a
problem is,
personal little
yeah, the problem is we don't know the MVP awards or any of the awards until
right before the
February.
Super Bowl.
You know,
Yeah,
this game happens in a week, so we'll find out. You know, uh, 2 weeks after this game, who won, and we'll be like, oh, Lamar deserved it, or Josh Allen deserved it. Whoever wins, people are going to be upset because they think the other person deserves it more, and I
yeah,
completely agree. Um, but let's get on to the next. So the next game, the the Eagles took on the Packers and won 22-10 with Jalen Hurts completing 13 of 21 passes for 131 yards and two passing touchdowns, which I actually think is pretty respectable for Hurts not throwing the ball for a couple of weeks. Saquon Barkley also carried the ball for 25 times for 119 yards. So I mean, he actually has the 2000 record now, if it counted, but it doesn't count when you get to the playoffs, so that kind of stinks. But the Packers struggled all game with uh, Jordan Love completing 20 of 33 passes for 212 yards, but had three interceptions with no touchdowns. What was your take on this game, Jack?
yeah. Obviously, I was very happy while watching this one. Nothing like
Yes,
hate
yes.
watching the Packers. My one question is though, like after watching this, is where do the Packers go? I think a lot of people were really, really excited about their future. Obviously, last year
Hmm.
after they took down Dallas in Dallas and then gave San Francisco a great game the next week, but they came into this season uh, probably slightly behind Detroit as favorites for the division,
Uh-huh.
but ended up going 1-5 in divisional games, not beating many opponents above 500. And I know it sounds rich for me as a Bears fan to be saying this because we were awful. I get it,
Yes.
but if you're the Packers front office, like you just dished out all this money to Jordan Love, and sure he has his moments, but it definitely has not been consistent. And you just
Absolutely.
brought in Josh Jacobs on a big contract, signed Xavier McKinney last offseason. Like there was roster improvement across the board, and yet they got out a round before they did last year in the playoffs. And I
Hmm.
think just the way this season ended should leave a very sour taste in a lot of Packers fans' mouth. And I just don't know what their next steps would be in order to create a roster that's able to compete with the type of teams that Philly and Detroit have in the NFC.
Oh yeah, sure, sure, sure. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, you think about what they need. They probably need an edge rusher. What else?
I mean, they need help. They need help at corner because Jair Alexander is most
Yeah,
likely getting
right.
cut, is what I've heard.
How old is he? How old is he?
He's, I think he's like late 20s, but he hasn't been healthy in like 3 years, and they're paying him a crap load of money. So I think they're just getting off of that contract this offseason, is what I've heard.
Let's see. He is 20, 28. He's 28.
Yeah.
He's actually going to turn 29 on the Super Bowl. That's a fun fact for everyone.
But how many
But
games has he played the last like 3 years combined?
that's a good
Might be
question.
very.
Um,
I'll look
I
it up real quick.
Yeah,
But I just know he hasn't been healthy for
he's got a
a majority
he
of.
played like what 12 or 13 games this year, something like that.
It looks like no. This year he only played 6 regular season games.
Wow, I thought he played more than that.
No,
Um,
he played 7 this year, 7 the year before that. Played
oof,
all 16 in 2022, and then only played 4 games in 2021. So he's only played over half a season once in the last 4 years, and they're paying him like
wow.
I think he's if not the highest paid corner, he's like a top 3 highest paid corner in the league. So
I mean, with what you said about getting cut, I mean, if any team takes a chance on him, it's a 1 year, whatever $10 million deal would probably be a reasonable amount of money, just to show that you can stay healthy. But based on what you said, I don't think he can stay that healthy. I mean, yeah, maybe he's in the league for 2 more years before he decides to hang it up. And sadly, one of the Bears all time greats, or used to be Bear. I mean, Khalil Mack is mulling retirement, which kind of is sad because I would love him to finish his career with the Bears. Maybe one more season, but that's his decision, not the fans. But that's just a little you know stroll down memory lane, with Khalil Mack. So whatever he decides, it's good enough for him. And he's had a great career, so I can't fault him for that.
no,
So the last oh wait, we have to talk about the Commanders game first. The Commanders and Bucks game was probably the best game of the week, because I mean it was close all game. The Commanders ended up coming out on top, 23-20, which is a little bit sad for me. I mean I wanted Baker to get further than one game into the playoffs, but Jaden Daniels completed 24 of 35 passes for 268 yards with 2 passing touchdowns. Uh, and then Baker Mayfield completed 15 of 18 passes for 185 yards with 2 touchdowns. But I mean, this game came down to the wire. I mean, the field goal was with zero seconds left on the clock. So I mean, it was tied all game. But I mean, I wanted Baker to win, but I can't
I did too.
I can't be
All,
upset
all I
with
re-
the Commanders winning either.
no, all I really have to say is I really hope Caleb has a good year next year. Not saying he didn't this year, but Jaden Daniels is a stud, and like
Mhm.
that's I think you can say that and still think that Caleb will have the better career. But right now, I mean, Jaden Daniels looks unreal. He's just so
Mhm.
poised at the end of football games. So hopefully the Bears can get some type of roster around Caleb because
Mhm.
those two battling in the playoffs for the next decade would be a lot of fun to
Oh, that
watch.
would be awesome. That'd be awesome. I can't. I hope to see. We hope to see that. Um, but the final game is tonight at 7 o'clock, with it being the Vikings against the Rams, and this actually is happening in Arizona because of all the wildfires out there in LA, and we are sad. We're sad to you know that this is all happening to the people in LA out there, and we're praying for you, and we hope that you're all safe and all that stuff. And I'm very happy that this is in Arizona and not in LA, because it's with what's going on down there. No one would want to focus on football. So I mean,
No, I mean fan and player safety obviously comes before
oh,
anything
absolutely,
relating to football.
absolutely. But with that being said, now the Vikings have been playing great. The Vikings have been playing great, but I feel like we don't know the results of this game yet because it hasn't happened. But I feel like with everything that's going on for the city of LA, um, the Rams will want to win this game more because of what's going on in the city. They want to cheer fans up and all that stuff, and I'm not.
Counterpoint. I've got a counterpoint. Sam Darnold went to USC, so that's his home. So Sam Darnold's going to ball out tonight. in on Los
Okay,
Angeles.
okay. I don't know how this game is going to end, but I think the the Rams will want it more. But I could see it going both ways, and I would honestly be happy with either result.
I've
But
got a 27-17 Vikings victory.
okay, wow, at 10 point. Okay, I
Going
um
big.
wow, that's bold. I
Sam Darnold supremacy. You know that.
I didn't like think of a score prediction, but since you gave one, I'll give one. I'll say the the Rams win 27-20. I'll say I'll say a 7 point difference. Um,
Like it.
so, but this is a great game. No matter what happens. I just I have one thing I have to say about the Vikings is how can you be the fifth seed with a 14-3 record? That's
It
ridiculous.
is. It is crazy. But
But it's
man,
all because it's
that's
all
what makes
because of
football
the
great. The divisions matter.
yeah, it's all because of the division, man. We have the NFC North is a great division. Now, let me say this. With most likely Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn leaving, and possibly Brian Flores leaving for head coaching jobs next year, that division might be up for grabs, depending on how the Lions fill those coordinator positions, and seeing if Brian Flores actually leaves Minnesota. But with the reports that came out with Pat McAfee saying, or not oh my god, I say Pat McAfee, I mean Ryan Fitzpatrick. Um, with Ryan Fitzpatrick saying that he has a hard time believing that he will find coaches to vouch for him. I don't know if he leaves Minnesota.
Yeah, it'll definitely come down to what job openings are still available and whether or not he was a candidate for those. But it seems like the Raiders and Bears are leaning towards an offensive minded head coach. And
I
I would
pray that.
assume the Saints, something just tells me the Saints and Jets will both go defensive coaches because that's just kind of what they always do.
I have
But we'll have to
I
see about
think
that.
the Jets and Saints are going to battle it out for Aaron Glenn. I think that's who they're targeting. I think that's
Yeah.
their number one candidate, which I think is a great candidate. I think he's a great candidate. He's going to be able to transform that defense wherever he goes. I just personally think he goes to the Jets because the Saints are in cap space hell. Excuse my language, but it's true.
Yeah.
And he played for the Jets when he was a player, so it just feels more natural. Um,
Yeah. For sure.
so that's my prediction on where Aaron Glenn goes, uh, and I'm pretty sure that everyone else would agree to that point.
Yeah.
But let's get into the coaching part of our podcast, because that's the part that we're more excited about. Um, so the Patriots hired Mike Vrabel to be their head coach, and this felt like the inevitable move. The only reason that this job was open was because Vrabel was in this hiring cycle. And if he wasn't, I think we could have seen a second season for Jared Mayo. And once they completed 2 interviews with Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich, everyone knew they were hiring Mike Vrabel. The Patriots kind of cheated the Rooney Rule because they interviewed two coaches who were on no one else's list. And the Patriots are known for cheating, so this does not surprise me, but I think the Rooney Rule needs to be adjusted slightly. I think it needs to be adjusted to where they actually interview people that are candidates for other jobs. I don't exactly know how you'd adjust this rule, but you could just figure out that those two candidates were not viable candidates. What's
I
your
mean,
thought?
The Patriots literally didn't even give them separate posts for their interviews. Like it was
Yes,
one
it was
dual
two.
post.
Yes, it was
We have
two.
interviewed
Oh,
these two people. Haven't seen that from anybody else on social media, and like other teams. I'm saying like everybody else has gotten their own picture for their
right?
interviews.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Uh, I mean, like you said, I don't think there's much else to comment on. Like it was pretty much everybody said when they saw that, okay, they're probably getting Vrabel, and then reports came out they really want Vrabel, and now they have Vrabel. So
Yeah, and I watched some of his press conference today. He, said that the coordinator positions, that he is going to hire haven't been filled yet. But I would be shocked if his offensive coordinator isn't Josh McDaniels. I don't know who his DC would be. Maybe he would be the defensive play caller, and someone else would just have the title of DC, which I think is very possible. But I mean, if his DC is not Josh McDaniels, I would be surprised the heck out of, because I mean, he's Josh McDaniels has had success there, and
it's
you
just
know,
funny. That'll be his third stint. I mean, I guess you could technically call it his fourth stint because he was there, head
then he
coach in
left,
Denver, back, agreed to the Colts job,
then he left.
backed out of it after less than a day, came back to the
Yeah,
Patriots, then went to the Raiders, and now this would be his fourth time coming back technically.
yeah. I mean, it's gonna be interesting, But the thing about this is, you should never want to rush your staff. Hiring your staff, like when okay, when Matt Eberflus was hired. I don't want to talk about him anymore, but I'm just gonna mention this. He hired Luke Getzey and all the people that he hired like within 2 days of getting the job, and that was not a smart move. In order to have a good, viable staff, you take your time with this. You actually bring people in for interviews about who your OC would be, or who your DC would be, or who your special teams coordinator would be. Every positional coach, every something like that. You actually interview people. You don't just hand your buddies jobs.
Yeah.
Um, which I will admit I think Ryan Poles did with Eberflus. We will never know on that, but I'm pretty sure he did. Um, so, um, so there are only two stories out there about two of the candidate coaches that the Bears interviewed so far, and it's with two of the better candidates. Those two candidates are Ben Johnson and Pete Carroll. Here's a quote about how the interview went with Johnson. The Bears were thoroughly impressed. They had high expectations, and it's safe to say that he met them and maybe even surpassed them. From the Bears' perspective, they were able to. They think they were able to alleviate some of his concerns about the Bears' leadership and organization. I mean, I hope that they knock this interview out of the park, because when the Bears had interviews set up with uh, Ben Johnson, they didn't interview anyone the day before. And my thought process on that is they didn't interview anyone on the day before of that interview because they wanted to take that day to make sure that this interview was like, knocked out of the park and everything. And I hope that's true. But, we don't know until he's hired as our coach or he's hired as someone else's coach. Now, I will say this: I don't see him taking the Jaguars job because he he wouldn't be able to bring his own GM with him. Now, here's what scares me: the Raiders moved on from Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco, um, and Tom Brady, is really pushing for Ben Johnson, and I think they're in a legitimate shot to get him. The one thing that the Bears have that the Raiders don't is they actually have an answer at quarterback. Um, but when Tom Brady is a minority owner and has won the championship 6 times or 7 times, that is a little enticing to join him. But I don't know if you know Tom Brady would be able to convince Van Johnson to take a job where he would need to tank for a year to get the quarterback. Because I'm not saying that the Raiders can't trade up to get the quarterback this year, but the the talent of quarterbacks in this draft are not what they were last year, and they seem to be better than, or they next year's draft seems to be better than this year's. But we won't know until next year how they look. So I think the Raiders and the Bears are the two options he'll thoroughly consider, but I'm hoping that he choose the Bears. What
Yeah,
are your
and I think
thoughts?
it's important. I think it's important to note. I see you have it in the script here. The Raiders are still paying three head coaches. Uh,
And a couple of
John
the
John John Gruden's still getting paid. Josh McDaniels is still getting paid,
and Antonio
and then
Pierce is still
Antonio Pierce is still getting paid. So that could definitely eat into the dollar amount that they're able to offer him. So I think that if anything would be something that plays into our hands, and it really just comes down to what he wants in a franchise. Does he value bringing in his own GM and having Tom Brady as a minority owner more than having his quarterback of the future in place and a significantly better roster? We'll have to see what he thinks.
And I mean, let's just say this. You know, let's just say uh, that hypothetically, even though Poles was able to get Ben Johnson, what what goes to say that they actually extend Brian Poles after he gets Ben Johnson, and then so you have Poles for a year, and then you bring your own GM next year. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
possibility. Now, it's a small possibility because people that are within like the Bears, reporters and all that stuff, they believe that once this coach is hired, polls will be extended. But we don't know, so that's something to monitor. But I mean, yeah, it's a two-man race between the Raiders and uh, the the Bears for our opinion. I mean, he also did want the Bears job last year, so I don't think that would change, much. I mean,
Hmm.
yes, we have a worse record than last year, but I mean, we have a lot more talent, I would say, in terms of quarterback play and all that stuff. So I'm fingers crossed fingers are still crossed for Ben Johnson. But we'll see. I mean, you know, and then let's get into Pete Carroll. So Pete Carroll also came across really well when he made a really good impression and had a very thought out plan for what he would do. He also had a succession plan with the, the Bears if he were to get the job. He would name an assistant head coach, and that would be his eventual successor. The thing I really like about Carroll is even though he's 73 years old, he sure doesn't act like it. I mean, and it's also being reported that Carroll is lining up top assistants if he were to get the job, and he has built some great staffs. All us Bears fans, I'm sure, care about is that none of his assistants are named Shane Waldron. But it's also important to note that Pete Carroll is interviewing with the Raiders this week, so that's another option for them. I mean, I hope that Pete Carroll gets a job somewhere, but the problem is there's only seven jobs now open with
Well, six. Oh yeah,
six,
yeah, yeah.
six because
Six.
because of Vrabel
The flip
getting
flop.
the
Yeah.
coach's job. I'm sorry. So there's six jobs now. There would have been five if the Cowboys had just agreed to keep Mike McCarthy, but he's moved on. So we'll see who the next head coach is there. Um, just God, I don't know if I would ever. I don't know if I would ever want to work with Jerry Jones. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely not the best management style. If you had to
no, it's
ask
not.
people
So
around
this,
the league, I
so
think.
yeah, so this week, the Bears can actually start interviewing candidates that are in the playoffs. So I think their list will trickle down into the shorter list of candidates that are actually being considered for this job. If I had to put my top five out there, I'd say Ben Johnson, Todd Monken, Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury, and Pete Carroll. If we could get anyone on this list with a strong coaching staff, along with a strong free agency and draft, the Bears are going to look very dangerous for the foreseeable future. I mean, I think that's a great top five. I wish that would be their top five, and I wish that we would have a
Yeah,
short list
I think
out there.
I
But
think McCarthy might slide in there somewhere right after Todd Monken, just because I know the Bears requested an interview originally, and now that he's
yeah,
free to interview anywhere, I'm sure he'll get some noise with the Bears. But we shall see.
yeah, I just hope that if he does become now, I don't want that. We don't want that. But if he does become the next head coach of the Bears, bring a better staff with you, please. I mean, he
Yeah,
hasn't had great staffs probably since being with Green Bay, and his offensive style is so old fashioned. I feel like it would be,
it's very archaic.
and that scares me. I mean,
Yeah,
I get that he has a Super Bowl and he has a great coaching record and all that stuff, but you have to evolve with time. You have to
yeah. I
move
mean, he's
your.
almost like the Doc. He's almost like the Doc Rivers of football. Like Doc Rivers
I
won
think
one
that's a good
championship with the
comparison.
Celtics in 2008, and he consistently takes his team to the playoffs, but they underachieve. And I don't want to like I people say like, oh, Mike Tomlin is the NFL Doc Rivers. I really don't think so. Like Mike Tomlin has been with the same team and taken below average rosters and
And made the
overachieved with
playoffs.
them.
The problem with him is he can't win in the playoffs, which for
No, but I really just think that's the fact that like I don't think most coaches make the playoffs with the roster he has. And I think that's why he gets a little penalized for sneaking into the playoffs and facing the number one team and then getting absolutely ran because they had no business
mhm,
being in the playoffs. But
sure.
it's definitely, I mean, I don't blame anyone who has the opposite opinion, but that's just my take on the whole Tomlin
No,
thing.
I think that's a good. I think that's a good take. So I mean, before we head out of here, the Bears have expressed interest in interviewing Marcus Freeman, head coach of Notre Dame, for their head coach position. And there's only one way I see him, making the leap to the NFL this year. I do think eventually he will be a head coach in the NFL or a position coach in the NFL. I just don't think he's ready yet. And the only way that I see him making that leap is if he wins the national championship, and that's completely possible. And if he does, that would mean we would have to buy out his Notre Dame extension, which keeps him around in Notre Dame until 2030. So that's we'd probably have to give him a 6 year uh, deal to to jump to the NFL. Now let's just run a hypothetical scenario where he does win the chip and wants to make the jump to the NFL. I have some concerns. And it's not whether he can command a team or game plan or clock management. Uh, it's it is how good of an NFL staff can he build? Because although he played in the NFL, he has never coached a minute in the NFL. It was different for Harbaugh when he left Michigan because he had already coached in the NFL and he has his brother coaching in the NFL. And they often seem to just trade assistants a lot. Since Freeman has never coached in the NFL, I'd be worried about the strength of his staff with no NFL experience. What are your thoughts on that, Jack?
Yeah, I just think that uh, Marcus Freeman would be hard pressed to leave the situation he's got at Notre Dame right
I
now.
agree.
Notre Dame fans love him. He reinstituted the pregame mass before every game, which is something that
That's
Brian
cool
Kelly got
though.
rid of.
I think that's
I mean,
cool.
you can see how much his players love him and play for him, and I just think he's got a really good thing going at Notre Dame. And I get
Absolutely.
the urge to when the NFL comes calling, it's hard to say no. But I think with the NIL money they have there, the way they're able
Mm-hmm.
to keep all the revenue they make for winning these college football playoff games because they're an independent, I think Notre Dame is set up to be one of the powerhouses of college football, even more so than they've been recently. I mean, they've always been a playoff contender, but they always seem to kind of get blown out when they get there. But I think now with the way that NIL is legalized throughout college football, they're going to be able to get some of these players that would have ordinarily gone to SEC teams and gotten paid under the table. So I think that Notre Dame is in a great spot, and I think Marcus Freeman just really embodies that school, and I don't see him leaving. But I understand why the Bears would be interested. Like it makes sense.
You know,
I've definitely grown on the idea more in the past couple of weeks as he's continued to do well, but I just don't see it as a realistic
yeah,
thing.
because sure. I mean, Marcus Freeman would definitely get the respect from his players. He gets the most out of them and all that stuff. But I mean, you know, again, what proof do you have that you can build a competent, you know, uh, NFL staff? And also with him being another defensive coach, as much as I definitely think that he is way better than Matt Eberflus. What's your plan for the development of the quarterback? Because usually the head coach is responsible for the development of the quarterback, not necessarily the offensive coordinator or whoever calls plays. Because but if he wants to make that jump and he wins the national championship, I mean, who's to say that he is this year's version of uh, Jim Harbaugh? I mean, it's possible. It's just it's a really small possibility compared to actually, last year the real Jim Harbaugh. Um,
Yeah.
you know it. We still probably won't find out who our coach is for the next 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully.
But
So
that's okay. Get it right this time,
yes,
Bears.
if it takes that long, that means that you have gotten it right, or you should have. So, I'm totally fine with waiting until right before the Super Bowl to have a podcast out breaking the news that hopefully Ben Johnson is the next head coach, or Todd Monken or someone like that. I I hope that they choose a guy that's not Mike McCarthy, but it just
We shall see. I mean, one thing you've learned as a Bears fan, I know I have, is expect the unexpected. Nothing ever goes
yeah,
according to
yeah.
plan.
I would
So,
not be surprised if their top three is Ben Johnson, hopefully Todd Monken, and Mike McCarthy.
yeah,
There's my prediction for top three of our choices.
I would have to say the exact same thing. And as much as I love Ben Johnson, I'm on the Todd Munkin train just because I'm a Baltimore stan. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting to get on that train as well, just because of the fact that I mean, as much as I want Ben Johnson, and we want to make sure that we get an offensive coach in there. It's just as much as the Raiders have problems with having to pay three coaches and two GMs. The Bears are also super cheap, so I could imagine them not wanting to pay Ben Johnson and maybe getting
Yeah,
a consolation prize in Todd Monken. But also with that, I will say this: with him being 58, he is 58, comes more experience, and he's been a head coach before.
he
He
has. And I think that checks a box that the Bears have said a couple times that they
it,
want to.
it is important to note that he has been a head coach in college, not the NFL. But any head coach level is great, because I believe that he when he overtook Southern Mississippi, I think is the head coach job he had. They had a 11-1 or a 1-11 record, and he coached them to a 9-5 record. I think that's right. So that's definitely a huge improvement. Um,
Mhm.
but with that being said, we're uh, easily 2 to 3 weeks away from finding that out. So, but hopefully we will find out that this list gets trickled down in the next week. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and this is Grant Winsauer and
Jack Rody.
signing off for today, and we will see you guys later this week. Have a good
See you,
weekend.
everybody.